Hi, and welcome back to Infamous Indiana. And we are going to start talking about part two of Herb Baumeister and the Fox Hollow Farms killings. And I know what you're thinking. I spent a lot of time in the first video really just talking a lot about his early life and things like that. And we didn't really delve too much into what Herb actually did, but I felt like it was super important to, build up that story and that anticipation because I feel like everything in this man's life led up to, the crimes he committed, and it I guess made him the person he was, if you will. So I really just want to get right down into it. This is the second part of the story, so do make sure you go check out the first part on my YouTube channel, That Dead Girl. Like, subscribe, follow, all that stuff. Please and thank you. And we will keep bringing you more videos in weeks to come. And again, all stuff about Indiana. So, we're just going to get right into it and flash forward to 1991. So, as I mentioned in the last video, his wife Julie, she's having all this, you know, all these doubts about her marriage to Herb, and she's really just fed up with his behavior, how he's been treating her at work, like she's lesser than him, and she's just noticing a change in him, and just he's becoming more and more weird to her. So, she's still taking the kids on trips, for weeks, weekends, months at a time, sometimes to Herb's mother's property in Lake Wawasee. So this is something they're doing quite often in 1991. So that leaves Herb at home with plenty of free time on his hands. And, it said that he wanted to stay home by himself to take care of their properties, and their businesses. Yeah. The businesses and the properties, I'm sure, is not the only thing he took care of during this time. But with that being said, Herb took special care in the way that he tended to Fox Hollow Farm. The landscaping, all of those things he did himself. He really took pride in his home and took pride, in just everything that they had. It's said that he paid extra special attention to the house, in particular, the pool house. And this place was very important to her, and you'll find out, why a little bit later on. But it said that he cleaned it meticulously, almost obsessively, constantly cleaning the pool, cleaning the area around it. He had a bar out there, and he made sure that the bar was fully stocked. Mind you, Herb didn't really have too many friends because, like we've talked about, he's a weird guy. So one of the weirdest things I, found early on when I was researching, looking at Google Images even just to find pictures of him and maybe pictures of the house, I did find quite a few pictures of these mannequins, I guess. And Herb would strategically place these mannequins around the pool house, and he would position them in such a way that it appeared they were just having this big fancy pool party. Needless to say, that's some weird fucking shit. And, I don't know exactly why he would do that. But in my mind, because he had no friends and he was such a lonely guy and spent so much time alone, it's almost like he was creating his own friends and having his own, parties in his fucking mind or something. And don't forget, he's also schizophrenic. Maybe he was talking to these mannequins. Maybe they were his friends, You never know. We'll just leave that open to interpretation, but something strange, and I found it to just be quite weird. Who the fuck keeps mannequins, just hanging around? And it's also said during this time is when Herb really started frequenting gay bars and the gay club scene in downtown Indianapolis. Now, it's really unknown how long he had actually been doing this, but during this time, like I said, Julie and the kids are away. He had plenty of time to just basically do whatever he wanted. So, I truly believe that this was a man that struggled with himself and even struggled with his sexuality. And I feel like Herb was most likely gay and just couldn't cope or couldn't deal with that. And I feel like that in itself is like the root of maybe why he did the things he did. He struggled with his sexuality. He struggled with, admitting to himself who he really was. And that's sad. It is sad not to have like, sympathy for the devil or whatnot, but it's very sad that he just felt that way and he, didn't know what to do with himself. And I do feel like he was in denial about his sexuality, obviously, but I do feel like he really just used his marriage and his businesses and just this persona that he created for himself as this upstanding, member of the community. He just used that as a mask to cover up, like the monster that he actually was. So something very dark was happening, in the gay club scene in downtown Indianapolis, right around the same time that Herb, has was said to be frequenting all these places. Several men had started to disappear mysteriously, and all of these men were similar in appearance, all led, similar lifestyles. Their ages ranged anywhere between, I think, age 20 and age 46. So creepy shit's going on, around the same time Herb is there. So just keep that in mind because we are going to talk about that too. I do find it strange that these I-70 killings stop completely, as soon as Herb purchases this property in Hamilton County, Fox Hollow Farm. And then, boom, just a short time later, all these men start disappearing from downtown Indianapolis. And it is important to point out that all the victims in the I-70 killings were from Indianapolis as well. So, like I said, we don't know how long he'd been doing this, but to me, it seems like he'd been doing this much longer than anybody thought. And I think I've mentioned a few times as well that Indiana is a very conservative state, and especially, in the 1990s, probably wasn't so cool to be, gay. And I could see that. There are still people today that have issues in this state with anyone who may be different or choose to love, whoever they want. There's a lot of, I guess, prejudices, if you will, and stereotypical bullshit that happens in this state. And I can only imagine just how hard it was for people in the 90s. So sadly, because of these men's lifestyles, and, some of them were prostitutes, some of them were drug dealers, some of them were alcoholics, but because of their lifestyles, cops didn't really take it too serious. They just assumed, oh, well, maybe they went to move to a more accepting place, or maybe they just disappeared. Maybe they were just tired of Indiana. And it's sad to think that they would just assume, with all the similarities that, oh, poof, they just went to go live their gay life somewhere else. It's just stupid to me, and I will never understand that. And this investigation, like in researching everything that happened, it's just very frustrating, and you're definitely going to be frustrated right along with me as I'm telling the story about everything that happened and all the shit that these investigators had to go through just to, have it all blow up right in their fucking faces in the end. And we'll get into that though. So in 1994, that's when the wheels finally started to turn a bit in this case. Enter Virgil Vandegrift of Vandegrift and Associates. Okay, so this guy, he was an ex-Marion County sheriff, and he opened his own firm, private investigation, and he specialized in missing persons cases. Now, Virgil is contacted by a woman who is the mother of a man named Alan Broussard. So Alan was last seen at a, known gay club called Brothers, and he was seen leaving with a white male, maybe mid to late 40s, in a light blue car with an Ohio license plate. It said that, he was seen getting into the car and kind of just, gave his friend a wave or a hand gesture just to say, see you later. And it wasn't uncommon to see Alan, leave a club, with another man. So anyways, his mother reaches out to Virgil. She's like, my son's been missing since, July, and nobody seems to care. Nobody's doing anything about it. So I really need your help. So no sooner than Virgil starts looking into Alan's disappearance, he's then contacted by another mother, and she just happens to be the mother of Roger Goodlet, who is another man who ended up missing in July 1994, towards the end of July, I would say. And he also disappeared under very similar circumstances, and definitely was last seen with a white male, mid 40s, in a light blue car with an Ohio license plate. So Virgil, being an expert, in missing persons cases, he just knows, there's some similarities here. I don't like this. I'm just really going to dig deep and I'm going to start pounding the pavement. He throws himself into the investigation fully. Now he starts going to all the bars and clubs that these men were known to hang out in. He starts questioning people, asking questions. Have you seen anybody fitting this description? Can you give me any details about, the last time these men were seen? He's posting flyers, he's just hitting it hard. He just wants to know what's going on and why these men are missing. So, in him doing all of this, he actually finds that it's not just Roger and Alan who have come up missing. In fact, there's almost a dozen men who are missing and under the same weird circumstances. So at this time, it became super clear to Virgil that, these aren't just one off, disappearances. All of these have got to be related. And he takes this information to IPD at the time. Now it's IMPD. Back then in the 90s, it was IPD. So he goes to them with his findings, and they're just like, yeah, we know about all these disappearances. We're not really too concerned about it, known drug dealers, prostitutes, they probably just went on their happy little way. IPD actually puts a woman named Detective Mary Wilson on the case for the missing persons. Now, she will become an integral part of the investigation because her and Virgil actually work side by side to, put the pieces together and solve the crime and, figure out what happened to these men. But as I said, the police just didn't take it seriously. So, they really just hit a wall. As soon as this, investigation started, they hit a wall immediately. And Virgil's just like, shit, man, I know in my gut that something is not right here. There is something seriously wrong going on, and I need to find the truth. So just as Virgil and Mary, they kind of start to lose hope. They have no new leads. They have nothing to go on other than, just the similarities in the cases. So oddly enough, one day out of the blue, Virgil gets a call from a man named Tony Harris. Now, mind you, this is an alias. This man has never actually revealed his true identity. So throughout the story, he's known in everything that I've read and researched as Tony Harris. So Tony actually has a very interesting story that he would like to share with Virgil. It turns out that Tony Harris was actually good friends with Roger Goodlet, and he had been helping Roger's parents in their search to find out what happened to their son. So he's going to these clubs, kind of the same thing the same approach that Virgil used. Going to clubs, passing out flyers, hanging missing persons posters, just that whole thing. He really wants to find out what happened to his friend. And one night he happens to be at a bar, um, and this guy is just sitting alone, and it kind of just, struck him as odd. This guy is just sitting by himself. It just gave him a weird vibe. So, he's watching the guy, and then he sees that he's fixated on something. So that draws his interest even more. So he watches him a little longer, and he sees that this man is staring at all of the missing persons posters that are hanging. And not only is he staring, but he's licking his lips and just exhibiting very odd behavior that no normal person would just be sitting there licking their lips, looking mesmerized at these missing persons posters. So his gut tells him, I think this guy knows something. He has to know something. Just the way he's acting, the air he has about him, I know that he knows something. So he makes up his mind. He's like, I have to talk to this man. I just have to go over here and do it. So he does. Now, He walks over, the two have several drinks. They're talking, they're getting to know one another, and Herb actually introduces himself to Tony as Brian Smart. So apparently this is the name that he used. Never told people his real name. Um like I said, they're talking, they're drinking, laughing, blah blah blah, and eventually Brian Smart asks Tony, "Hey, would you like to come back to my place?" Huh? And he says, "Okay." So admittedly, I can imagine the guy is probably terrified, especially if he thinks this man could know or maybe even potentially be the reason why his friend is missing. So he gets in the car with Herb and or I'm sorry, Brian Smart is who he knows him as. He gets in the car and they go for a drive. Now he notices they're going out of the city. They're driving, further and further north, right? So they finally get to the property. He notices there's a sign, obviously they're drunk. They've had a lot to drink. He notices a sign that just says farm. And they take this long winding road. They pull up in the driveway. So they pull up in the driveway and Brian Smart, Herb, whatever, he makes it a point to tell Tony, "Oh, I don't live here. This is actually my boss's property. And I act as kind of like, a caretaker while he's away on business and whatnot." So they get out, and Herb gives them kind of a little bit of a tour of the home, and they eventually end up in the pool house. And we all know this is Herb's favorite room in the entire house. So upon entering the pool house, obviously the first thing that Tony notices is all these mannequins sitting around. So he asks, he's like, "Hey dude, what's up with all these fucking mannequins and shit you got lying around?" And he's like, "Oh, my boss, he's a lonely man, and it just helps him to not feel alone," basically. So obviously, Tony's not feeling the vibe. You know, I could imagine walking in and seeing something like that would just be fucking weird in itself. But, he goes along because he just has to know, does this man have something to do with Roger being gone? So the two, they go into the pool house. They have a lot to drink. They even do some cocaine. They're hanging out. They're talking. And at some point, they decide to go for a swim. So they're still talking. They're hanging out. And then they start talking more and more about their sexual interests, if you will. So Herb asks Tony, "Have you ever heard of autoerotic asphyxiation?" And Tony's like, "No." Autoerotic asphyxiation is the practice of sexual self-stimulation, okay, while causing oneself to experience hypoxia, which is believed to heighten the sexual experience, and this is usually achieved by hanging, strangulation, suffocation, or the inhalation of volatile chemicals. So, in layman's terms, basically, you are masturbating, pleasuring yourself while also choking yourself or restricting your airways, to put it bluntly. That's what Herb was into. And I find it interesting that, he's into choking, and we do know that all the victims in the I-70 killings were all strangled. Interesting. So anyway, he's asking Tony, "Do you know what this is? Have you ever heard of it?" And Tony's like, "No, I've never heard of it. I don't know what that is. I've never tried it." And Herb is just telling him, "Oh, dude, this is the bee's knees. This is the best orgasm you're ever going to have in your life," And eventually he asks Tony, "Would you like to try it with me?" So obviously Tony is a little like probably weirded out, but like I said, he just presses on because he just has to get to the bottom of it. He wants to know what happened to his friend. So Herb suggests that, you do me first and then I'll do you. I'll return the favor or whatever. And so they're in the pool and Herb's jerking it and Tony is choking him, to put it lightly, if there's any way to put that lightly. So they're getting it on and whatnot. Herb's getting his wank and choke on, and he comes to fruition, if you will. So now it's Tony's turn. So obviously he's a little bit nervous. Herb is like, "Oh, calm down. It's going to be great. You're going to love it, whatever, Herb actually grabs a pool hose. Now, Tony just used his hands on Herb, but Herb takes it up a notch and he decides he's going to use a pool hose. So he wraps the pool hose around Tony's neck. And it said that, everything was going fine at first. I mean, as fine as that can be. It's fucking creepy. Not here to kink shame, but I think it's just a little weird. Anywho, everything's going fine, and then Tony quickly realizes, like, this dude is not gonna let go. His grip is getting tighter and tighter, and he's just like, holy shit, I'm gonna die. So he passes out. Now, Herb, I'm assuming, thinks that Tony is dead. So he goes on about his business. I'm assuming this would be the time, where he would start to clean up the pool house, maybe dispose of the body, what have you. Anyway, Tony actually comes to. He wakes up. And when Herb sees that he's not dead, it's said that he just has this look of astonishment on his face. Like, he just couldn't believe that Tony was alive. So Tony is like, oh my God, he's gathering himself, his thoughts, his things, and, he goes home and he barely escapes with his life. Now, it's really unclear why Herb let Tony go. It's just odd. I'm guessing none of his other victims made it out alive. But it is said, and even Virgil Vandegrift had theorized that because of Tony's size, I guess this man was like, 6'6", 6'7". He was a big guy. Herb just let him go because it was said that Tony could have easily overpowered Herb at any moment that he chose. Also strange to me that this Tony person did not fit the description of any of the other men in either the I-70 cases or the, all the missing men from Indianapolis. The description didn't match. So maybe in Herb's mind, he was trying to, break his pattern to throw off investigators or throw off police to try to not get caught. That's the common belief, and I think that's pretty accurate. I think that may be why, he just chose this guy. Or maybe it was just because the guy came on to him first, and he was lonely. You'll never know. Virgil is shocked by what he's just been told. And he's like, holy shit, this could be my smoking gun. This could be the break that I've been waiting for. So he takes this information to IPD and, they're basically just considering it hearsay because it's just a story that some guy told. They're not really believing it. They're not really putting much into it at all. They're just like, whatever. This is just some gay guy telling a story. We have no proof. We need more proof from you before we can move forward or do anything. What they needed was, a real name, a name of the location. They just needed more solid evidence. And at that point in time, Virgil, he didn't have it. So Virgil reaches out to Tony again to see, kind of pick his brain and see if he remembers any little minute small detail that may put him on a new lead or a different path in the investigation. So basically Tony tells him, dude, I was super inebriated, but I remember driving north. I remember there was a sign, outside of the property that said farm. He said, I remember there was a long, driveway. He described the house as being a mansion, it had a pool, blah, blah, blah. And, he gives a description of Herb, or Brian Smart, to him. White male, in his 40s, not very tall, light blue car, Ohio license plate, all the things that we've heard before. So with this information, Virgil, he again starts to pound the pavement. He takes, the description of the property, the car, and of Herb back to the bar scene. He basically starts over from square one to cover his tracks and make sure that he hasn't missed anything thus far. Interestingly enough, only a week after Tony Harris first made contact with Virgil, Tony is contacted by Herb again. And, he's basically telling him how much he likes him and how he would like to hang out again. A couple of days after, actually, he contacts Tony on the phone, he's seen lurking around outside of Tony's house in his car, just being a creeper, being a Joe, if you will. If you ever watched, the show you know what I'm talking about. He's just creeping on him. So at this point, Tony's like scared shitless, scared for his life. So he contacts Virgil again and he's like, yo, dude, I am fucking terrified. Please help me. He's calling my house. He knows where I live. He's sitting outside. My neighbors have seen him. Can you please help me? So Virgil and Mary Wilson, they see this as an opportunity. They want Tony to basically become an informant. They want him to contact Herb and see if he can set up a meeting in a public place. Now, the idea was to get a name, maybe even get back into Fox Hollow Farm, the mansion, get the actual location. So Tony's scared, but they offer him protection. They're like, we're going to be there. We're going to be listening. Nothing is going to happen to you. So he agrees. And he sets up the meeting with Herb in a public place. And, police stake out the area. Now they sit and they wait for hours and hours and hours. And Herb actually never shows up. So again, he escapes. He just keeps fucking skating by this whole time, this whole story that we've been telling. Like, every time they get close to him, boom, nothing. So I would always wonder, like, did he know he was being set up? Was he trying to tie up loose ends? Was he going to end Tony Harris's life to make sure that he left no stone unturned? We'll never know, but it's just weird to think about. What if he did actually know he was being set up and that's why he didn't show? So everybody's frustrated that's involved in this case. I mean, they just keep hitting wall after wall after wall. Like they can't catch a fucking break, And so they start combing through all the evidence all over again. They go back to square one. And in doing this, they find, a couple of things. And like I had mentioned before, both Roger and Alan had been last seen with a white man in his 40s leaving, clubs or bars in a light blue car with an Ohio license plate. Detectives decide to follow up more on these Ohio leads, so they get in contact with a Detective Linloff of Preble County, Ohio. And what they find actually is that Detective Linloff has a series of unsolved murders and disappearances of his own, all bearing striking similarities to the disappearances that they're now currently dealing with in Indianapolis. Men all similar in appearance, similar in age, all strangled, all found near streams or ditches, nude, partially clothed. Most importantly, all men were from the Indianapolis area. Also, it's interesting that, these I-70 killings went on during the 1980s and the early 90s, with the last body being found in 1991. Again, right around the time our favorite little Herb Baumeister purchased Fox Hollow Farms. This definitely solidified their belief that they were in fact dealing with a serial killer. There were just too many similarities in all these crimes for them to ignore at this point. So they just knew, they're dealing with some sick fuck and he's a serial killer. And they were right. And at this time, they're still coming through back evidence and all these clues that they've gathered. So Virgil actually starts driving around Hamilton County to see if he can find this house or any house matching the description that Tony Harris had given him. So he comes across a property on East 156th Street that he thinks, this may be it. So he sends an investigator, one of his best, investigators, out to the property to kind of like scout it out, peep it out, see what's going on. So the investigator reports back and he says, I'm pretty sure this is the house, bingo, this is the one. It's got the sign, the farm sign out front, long winding driveway, big mansion, lots of land, pool house. He said, this is our house. So they run a check, to see like who the mortgage or whatever the property is, what name it's under. And what do they find? The property is under the name of none other than Herbert Baumeister. They take this to Hamilton County, they take it to their police, and the police are just like, no. They even tell them, the story from the informant. They tell them all the evidence they have, and Hamilton County just deems this story to be unbelievable. They don't believe that anyone in their community could ever do such a thing. So, there again, another wall, nothing. Just stopped dead in their tracks in their investigation yet again. So, with every door that closes in this case, or every brick wall that they hit, there seems to be, like a silver lining or another door opening. So, strangely enough, Tony is out at a bar with some friends, and who should he happen to see but none other than Herb? So, he's freaking out. He's like, oh shit, he's gonna recognize me. Oh my god. So, he asked his friend, he's like, hey dude, this is the guy I was telling you about. This is the guy who almost killed me. I think he's the one who's responsible for all these people disappearing. So he convinces this friend to stay with him and kind of keep an eye on Herb and watch him and wait for him to leave so that they could either potentially follow him or maybe just get some type of information to give to police. So they wait, and this whole time Tony's laying low, trying his best to be incognito, and Herb eventually gets up to leave, so the friend discreetly follows him, going out the back way as not to be seen, follows him outside. Now Herb gets into his car and goes to leave, but the friend is actually able to jot down a license plate number. Now, mind you, he's in a light blue car with an Ohio license plate. Again, we're going to keep bringing that up because it's important. He gets the license plate number, and they take this immediately to Virgil and Mary, and they're like, yo, we got his license plate number. So they do a Bureau of Motor Vehicles check, and I guess Herb got a little sloppy because the car is registered in his name. So now they've got the property. Now they've got, proof that this light blue car that's been described many times in all these missing men's cases, we've got the license plate number, and it's all coming back to Herb. So they just get right into it. They confront him, and they start first questioning him about the missing men. Do you know what's happening with this? Because we have reason to believe that you may know something. And, it said that Herb kept it cool, but they could clearly tell that he was agitated. I think one officer even said you could see, like, the neck veins in his neck, like, bulging out. And he's like, nope, don't know what you're talking about, have no clue about any of that stuff. They even go so far as to confront him with Tony Harris's story. Now, at this point, he gets angry. And he's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Get the fuck out of my store. I have nothing to do with this. You got the wrong guy. They even offer to search his property to, eliminate him as a suspect. And he absolutely says no. Fuck you. He refuses. So, nothing comes of it, but now their suspicions are really starting to grow just with his reaction to them questioning him about what happened. So they take everything they've learned back to Hamilton County yet again to try to get a search warrant for the property. And guess what? Hamilton County says, no, we're not giving you shit. You need more evidence. And this just pisses me off because I feel like they can link the house to him. They have a man who can positively ID him. They have his card. They have his license plate number, and it's all tracing back to him. And you mean to tell me that that's not enough to get a warrant to search this man's property? Something fucky was definitely going on in this investigation, and I just feel like Hamilton County really dropped the fucking ball. And I don't know why, but I feel like it's almost like they were protecting him for some reason. And it's just infuriating, to say the least. So 3 months pass, and during this time, Julie actually files for a divorce from Herb. And their businesses are in disarray. Their marriage is shit, falling apart. Herb is trying to get full custody of their kids. He actually has the son with him in Lake Wawasee. And that's where he's staying because he's moved out of Fox Hollow Farm completely. So Things are just getting worse and worse for him in his personal life, and honestly, it is going to lead up to his downfall. So police get wind of the divorce, and they're like, maybe the wife is finally going to be able to talk, be able to tell us something now that they're getting a divorce. Maybe she feels more comfortable. So they get in contact with her and they tell her, we are investigating some homosexual homicides. And her reaction is like, excuse me? Like, I don't even know what that is or what to think of it. So they explain to her what it is. And, that Herb is definitely, in their mind, somehow involved in all of these disappearances. And they ask her, is there anything that you can tell us to help us in any way? Something that you might know or remember, anything you can recall will be helpful, basically, at this point. So she tells them no. And she's, kind of pissed off by the whole situation. They try to ask her, for permission to search the property. She, no, nope, not doing it, not coming on my property. Basically, tells them to go fuck themselves. But interestingly enough, it piqued her interest enough that she sought legal counsel or legal help. Actually goes to her lawyer, Bill Windling, and she asked him to kind of keep tabs on the investigation, contact police, and basically to get more information and come back and tell her. So Bill comes back and tells Julie everything that the police have. He tells her about the informant story, the light blue car, Ohio license plate. I mean, he tells her everything. And he's like, Julie, you've been married for so long. Are you absolutely sure that there is nothing you can recall that could help them in their investigation or, even help you? So she reluctantly begins to tell him about the time her son found a skull and skeleton in their backyard. Now the lawyer, he's just like, "What the fuck, dude? Why are you not telling them this?" And she's like begging him, "Please, please, please do not. Do not tell the police this. I am telling you this in confidence. Just don't tell them." Now, I don't know why she wouldn't want to divulge that information, because things could have gotten solved a lot quicker had she chosen to tell them. But maybe she had her reasons. Maybe she knew it was really the only card she had to play. And I do feel as though she was in fear for her life and in fear of her children's lives. Herb was volatile. She didn't know how he was going to react. So I feel like with her withholding that information, that was probably why, because it was the only card she had to play against him. So investigators are fucking frustrated. Hamilton County is not being cooperative at all. They have nothing new. So they can't get a search warrant from Hamilton County. Herb and Julie have both denied them access to the property. So now they really just start to get a little bit creative. So they decide to use a technique called FLIR. FLIR is forward looking infrared. So basically, it captures heat signatures that come up from the ground. So if there's a body there, um it can detect that. It can detect the heat sensors or whatever. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I read. So they decide to try to use this technique. They fly over the property, hoping that if there's a body there or something like that, that they'll be able to detect this with the FLIR shit. So they fly over and it yields no results. It's middle of winter. And if there were any bodies there, they had probably been there for quite some time and there would be no heat signature essentially. So it didn't help. The fact that they have to jump through all of these hoops with everything they have against him just pisses me off. Because I really feel like lives could have been saved. We could have really taken this fucker down, taken him out. Had Hamilton County just at least cooperated in any fucking way, shape, or form. And it's just sad to think about. Like, so much time And this investigation was wasted because of their lack of caring for, any of it. So at this point, Herb and Julie's divorce is in full swing, okay? And shit is flying. They're getting ready to be fucking down and dirty in court, fighting against each other. At this point in time, like I said, Herb had moved out and he actually had Julie's son staying with him full time in Lake Wawasee. Now, this really concerned her, especially with everything that she's finding out now. She just really did not want her son anywhere near her, and that is completely understandable. I wouldn't want any of my kids to be fucking around with that guy either. This leads to her, legal counsel, Bill, begging her, basically, Julie, please. You don't know what he's capable of. What if he's actually involved and guilty of what they say he's guilty of? You have yourself and your children to think about. You really need to come forward and tell them everything that you know. Even as minute as you may think it is, to them it could mean everything in this case. You got to protect yourself. You got to protect your kids. Something he said really got through to her, because on June 24th, 1996, Julie finally agrees to cooperate with police. He tells police about, the situation she had experienced just a few years prior with her son finding the skeleton and the skull on the property. So obviously, investigators want to know where this happened. They want to go there first. So she takes them out back into the wooded area. They're walking through, and she's like, this is where it happened. This is where we saw it. She goes on to tell them that she had went back to the spot where it had been found the next day, and it was gone. So obviously he had moved it. So they start looking around and kind of, digging around a little bit, and an officer looks over and he's like, hey, that kind of looks like a bone. So they start digging, and they actually find that it's a human femur bone. And they're like, fucking bingo, we got it. So it said that once they started uncovering the bone or whatever, Julie turned white as a ghost. And she was quoted as saying, I think I'm going to be sick. And she almost faints or passes out. And there is a part of me that thinks maybe she was in denial. I think she had to know some of this stuff was going on. Maybe she didn't necessarily know all the details, but she had to know, like, something wasn't right and all this shit was happening on her property. Like, there's no way you're gonna tell me you didn't know. Especially after finding that shit. You're just not gonna think about it. I mean, come on. Get real. There's no fucking way in hell. Especially as a woman. We crazy. We have our woman's intuition, and most of the time our gut is on fucking point. So with the discovery of the femur bone, police are finally able to obtain a search warrant with Julie's permission. And, during this time, like I said, Herb still has their son with him, and they're not responding. They've basically kind of gone AWOL. Nobody knows what's going on with the son or with Herb. So Julie's lawyer files a petition for emergency custody with, the discovery and them finally being able to obtain a search warrant. And the reason being is that Herb was suspected of murder, obviously, but they didn't want him to lash out at his son or use his son, as collateral or something. So he goes to the court with this, and the court grants it immediately. So the request is granted, and Hamilton County goes to retrieve their son from Lake Wawasee. Now, this is going to piss you off, or it should piss you off, because it fucking pissed me off. They go, they know what's going down on this property. It's being searched. They're finding human remains, human bones on this property. They don't question Herb. They don't even take him in. They don't do shit. They literally go there, get the boy, and they leave. Why did they not question him? Why did they not take him into custody immediately? To me, you find some fucking human bones on somebody's property, that's right there is evidence enough to at least bring them in for fucking questioning. So, to me, that's just mind-blowing that he just keeps escaping everything that's happening to him, and it's such fucking bullshit. So at this point, the search has been going on for about 3 days, and they end up finding more bones in another location that is near a stream. Now, you'll remember I mentioned earlier, all of the bodies in the I-70 killings were placed near streams or bodies of water. Interesting shit, you know? So they find even more bodies a little further up the property close to this stream. I think it was said that it was close to the edge of his property, actually. So police were quoted as saying there were enough bones to basically create a whole entire graveyard. So they end up finding 5,000 bones and bone fragments in these two areas of the property, and there are no skulls, which, as you can imagine, is going to make it very difficult to identify any of the bodies without use of dental records or anything like that. And it's believed that these bones belong to at least 11 different people. Hamilton County still refuses to arrest Herb. Like, what the fucking fuck, dude? Seriously? They still refuse to arrest him. Basically, their take on the situation is that, okay, there's bones on the property, but there's no proof that he killed anybody. It's just bones. What the fuck was it? Did he live on a fucking Indian burial ground? Why are there human fucking bones on anybody's property is my fucking point, and why they refuse to arrest him. Like, I still say there's something more to that. They were protecting him or covering up some shit. Like, there's no way in fucking hell anybody's gonna find bones on someone's property and not, like I said, bring them in and at least question them. It's just, I literally can't even. So, they found all these bones. They're building their case. They bring in an FBI profiler, and, the police are just kind of wondering how Herb was able to carry on this double life, especially with his businesses and his wife and kids around. And Julie's like, well, we weren't really around a lot, to be honest with you. We, went on trips as a family. We would go stay at the condo that his mother had in Lake Wawasee, and we did this quite often. And once she revealed this, please ask, is there any way you can confirm the days, that you and the kids were gone? So she's like, yeah, every time we've gone, I've recorded it in my calendar. So they compare the dates on Julie's calendar from when her and the kids were out to the times of men disappearing. And they definitely coincided. So boom, there's more proof for them. The dates that Julie and the kids were out of town are the same dates that these men disappeared. So we know that Hamilton County Police have retrieved the son. He's back with his mom, safe and sound. But during this time, Herb actually leaves the lake house. And what's interesting about that as well, he's left the lake house, but Hamilton County doesn't really find it necessary to be tracking Herb's whereabouts for some reason. We just found 5,000 fucking bones in your yard. We don't think it's necessary to track you or figure out where you are or where you're going. Police are then contacted by Herb's brother, and he tells them that he spoke to Herb, and Herb asked him to wire him some money via Western Union. So he does so. He sends him money, and the location is somewhere in Michigan. So cops at this point are fearful that he is going to flee to Canada to, escape everything that's going on right now. Virgil, IPD, everybody involved, contacts Hamilton County and tells them, why aren't you tracking his whereabouts? We've just gotten word that he's taken money from his brother and he's basically on the run. He's on the move. And they've still made no effort to track him, to arrest him, to really just do much of anything but sit around and fucking twiddle their thumbs. And like I said, Hamilton County is doing nothing. And more than 6 days after Herb's brother contacted IPD to tell them that, Herb was somewhere in Michigan, Hamilton County has still done nothing. They haven't tracked him, and they still have not alerted Canadian authorities to look out for him. I mean, the more and more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more fucking pissed off I get. It's just, unbelievable the lack of police work that went down in Hamilton County on this investigation. It's sad. So basically, Herb, he's on the run. He actually crosses the Canadian border alone. He's stopped, by a Mountie, just as you would be crossing the border. They stop you, they ask you a bunch of questions, and the lady that stopped him actually said that he had come into Canada alone, but noticeably his car was full of stuff, but it was like covered up by a blanket. So came into Canada alone and had a bunch of stuff with him. So later on that night, I guess Herb had like pulled to the side of the road to, take a nap or whatever. And the same lady, Mountie, whatever you want to call him, uh, stops him. She's like, yo, you can't sleep here. There's plenty of rest stops down the road. You got to move. So if Hamilton County had put out a warrant for Herb's arrest or anything like that, as soon as he tried to cross into Canada, it would have popped up and they would have been able to apprehend him. But because they didn't, Herb skates on through and now he's in good old Canada. On July 4th, 1996, IPD is contacted yet again by Herb's brother, and this time he tells them that Herb has committed suicide in Canada. So you know what that means. He's committed suicide. He can't be brought up on charges. He can't be taken to trial. No justice for these families because he took the coward's way out and is now dead. Herb's body was found in Pinery Provincial Park. I think it's somewhere on or around Lake Huron, but on the Canada side. So a man and his wife are driving down the road and they happen to see a car, abandoned or whatnot on the side of the road. So they decide that they're going to stop and they're going to check it out because it just seemed odd to them. So the man gets out of his car, he's walking, and he sees the car's empty and he notices 2 sets of footprints. So he follows the footprints and eventually that leads him to like a mound of sand because it was kind of like a beachy area, if you will. And he sees Herb's body lying there, eyes open, mouth open, and dead of an apparent gunshot wound to the head. And there was a suicide note, and we'll get more into that in just a second. But I do want to point something out that I find really interesting. I was watching a documentary about this on YouTube. I think it's called like Horror of Fox Hollow Farm or something. It's kind of like a ghost hunting type thing, but also gives a little bit of history and eyewitness accounts and things like that in it. But yeah, you can go watch it on YouTube. But the guy who discovered Herb's body actually said that there was no gun at the scene. Like, did he just fucking shoot himself in the head and then throw the gun? Like, I just find that to be fucking weird. And he also said that the body seemed to be strategically placed. And why he thought this is because there were 2 dead seagulls, like, kind of displayed. He said the body was on display and these seagulls were perfectly placed next to on either side of the body. All around the area where Herb was. Now, there were 2 sets of footprints, mind you, on the road, but where Herb's body was, there were no footprints to be found. I just find it very odd, and it's not mentioned anywhere else, so I can neither confirm nor deny this, but I don't see why the eyewitness would lie. Why was there no gun at the scene of the crime? It's just another question we'll never have an answer to because, he took himself out. But I did want to bring that up because I thought it was fucking weird and I didn't see it anywhere else other than this documentary. So Herb left a suicide note, and now you may be thinking, oh, did he reveal anything? Did he admit to the killings? Did he admit to what he did? And the answer, sadly, is no, he did not. The suicide note was almost very narcissistic. He basically just talked about how he had gone to a park earlier in the day and that's where he was going to kill himself, but then he chose not to because he saw children in the area. So I guess good for you on that for choosing not to do it where you saw some kids, but whatever. Um, he basically just talked about his business is failing, he was going broke, his marriage was over, and that, he was sorry. And basically, that's all it was. Just the reason he killed himself is because of his finances and his marriage failing. So there's no closure here for victims, there's no closure for police, no closure for Julie or her children, and we'll never know. He never got charged. Never got brought to trial. And like I said, 11 to 22 men, if he is in fact also the I-70 killer. Um, it's just insane. So much time, like I said, wasted in this investigation. Hamilton County, fucking shame on you, because you really fucking dropped the ball and he could have been stopped. He could have been brought to justice. And I feel so bad for the victims' families, and I do know that 11 of the victims found on Fox Hollow Farm were eventually identified, and it took years. And in 2015, the remains were actually returned to the families finally so they could, be put to rest. Now, just a little bit of history about the property since all this shit happened. A man named Robert Graves actually purchased the home for well under market value, and there for a while he was doing ghost tours, and you could actually pay to go inside and do your own like private ghost investigating shit. And it was very popular. Like every time they had an event, it would immediately sell out. Now, as soon as I think 2020 or 2021, I read an article from Indianapolis Star stating that there was a man who owns Urban Vines Winery. He'd actually purchased a piece of the land. Okay. Not really sure what happened there, but I ran out of time. Like my video just stopped. So I kind of just wanted to wrap it up, and thank you for going on this very long journey with me. I know it was a lot to cover, and I definitely probably could have split it into 4 parts so the second video wasn't so long, but I just wanted to finish the story. I wanted to get it out there, and I wanted people to really know, everything that happened. And I feel really bad for, like I said, the families involved never really truly having justice. And I just think that Herbert Baumeister is the perfect example of a fucking piece of shit coward. And I don't think he even deserved his fate. Like, he deserved much worse, in my opinion. I would have much rather seen him get the death penalty, or at the very least spend the rest of his life in prison, And I do think, the victims' families deserved a lot more, and his own family deserved more, to be honest with you. So, with that being said, thank you for listening to this very long and drawn out story. I know it was a lot, and I got pretty ambitious with the first story. Of course, I picked the fucking guy that, allegedly kills 22 people to start this whole journey out. Been shaking around, a couple of ideas for my next story, and I'm kind of thinking maybe Sylvia Likens or Shayna Scherer. I'm not too sure yet, but once I figure it out, you can be sure to check it out on my channel. Again, like, subscribe, follow me. It's That Dead Girl, all one word, on YouTube. And thank you for watching. Stay spooky, keep it creepy, and remember, if you're in Indiana, stay fucking safe, because it's crazy as fuck out here. Bye.